Now, it's an important story that we're tracking over here. India's defense forces are forever there to defend the country against any kind of security threat. And now, we're going to bring you a story with visuals of how a heroic act has been performed by the Indian Air Force. The Indian Air Force to the rescue of a 17-year-old boy who's stuck in the Gujarat floods. Now, that's a helicopter of the Indian Air Force that was used with high-tension wires, and in a heroic act, the boy was saved despite him having fractures from waist below. The Air Force performing an heroic act and picking up from his house where he was stranded amidst the floods that have ravaged Gujarat. Take a look at these visuals on your screens. They show what the defense forces do for the country. Apart from guarding the borders, apart from guarding us against any security threat, they also save human lives. Visuals on your screens of how an Indian Air Force helicopter performed a heroic act by throwing down a high-tension wire and rescuing a 17-year-old boy stuck in the Gujarat floods. We have Republic TV's Deputy News Editor Snehesh Philip joining us with more details of that story of heroism. Snehesh, Indian Air Force protects the country either way, day in, day out, and now they are to the rescue of those stranded in the Gujarat floods.
Absolutely. You know, this is just another instance where the IAF actually done a tremendous job, an incredible job in which they evacuated the 17-year-old boy who had multiple fractures waist below. Now, what we've learned so far is that the state administration contacted the IAF last evening seeking immediate evacuation. You know, since it was already sunset, the IAF could not dispatch a new helicopter, and hence already an Mi-17 helicopter, which was already in the vicinity carrying out relief operations, was diverted to this particular place. Now, the biggest problem that the IAF faced was the fact that he could not be winched up just like any other regular individual, because this guy had multiple fractures waist below. So on board the aircraft itself, with the IAF team, the 3-member crew actually went ahead and formed a cradle, in air, and which was eventually used to rescue this particular individual. As you can see from the video, this entire house was waterlogged, in the sense that it was surrounded by water. There was no other way to rescue him, and only the IAF could have stepped in, which they did, despite it being a sunset time, despite the fact that there was less of visibility, and at the same time, they didn't have the exact equipment that was needed to rescue this boy.
Right, and Snehesh, the bigger difficulty is that this boy was fractured from waist downwards. It's one thing to pick up somebody stranded in the floods using high-tension wires. It's another thing to delicately airlift him even as he's fractured from waist downwards.
Absolutely, because that was one of the main problems that the IAF crew, the 3-member crew on board the helicopter faced, because he could not be winched just like any other individual. And that is why they had a discussion, and they eventually evacuated him using a cradle. Cradle was something that they made themselves while on board. It was not something, it was not the actual proper cradle, but they made it on board the helicopter itself and tested it for all safety measures, and which was eventually used to rescue the 17-year-old individual.
Absolutely. Republic TV's Deputy News Editor Snehesh Philip there getting us that story of heroism from India's Defense Forces, the Indian Air Force rescuing a 17-year-old boy stranded in the Gujarat floods with a helicopter, a heroic act from Indian Air Force. And we here at Republic TV salute the Indian Air Force and India's Defense Forces as always.